Hi guys, and welcome to SAT Hacked Course Study Strategies with me, Matt Kleinsteiber. So this episode of SAT Hacked was inspired by some messages that I received over the last week or two from some of my students who, I had actually sent out a spreadsheet, right, as kind of encouragement to my students. And the spreadsheet was just my, I had done kind of a week-long program over the New Year break here in Thailand. Some of my local students, and a lot of them saw pretty big score jumps over that week. And I also did a 3-week long summer program with some of them. And again, over that 3-week period, we saw pretty significant SAT score jumps, 100 points, 200 points, 300 points. And so I sent that to some of my new students, and they asked me, well, Matthew, what exactly happened? How are those students able to get such big score jumps in such a short period of time? A lot of them said things to me like, I'm willing to put in the work, I just simply don't know what to do. I don't know how to study. So this video is for them. I'm thinking especially, I think it was Mohammed, sent me a message on Telegram asking me that. So this is for you. So let's go ahead and jump into the video. So I want to talk about 4 core study strategies that I think are the most effective way to increase your score on the SAT. Strategy 1, setting up a schedule, okay? And that schedule is actually going to center on taking timed practice tests in a realistic setting, okay? So that's kind of the core of your schedule. You take a practice test, and then the next thing you need to do is look at what happened in that test, okay? So you're keeping track of your scores, you're looking at your mistakes in a very detailed way. And we'll get into all of this in more detail throughout the video. 3, you want to study your weaknesses. And 4, you want to make sure that you're reviewing your weaknesses at set intervals because people tend to forget, right, the strategies that they need to use. So yeah, let's go ahead and we'll look at what an example study schedule would look like. So this is an example study schedule, and I've just done a kind of 4-day schedule here to show you guys some examples. Saturday, I've kind of called the all-day study day, right? So we're devoting 6 hours. I hope I did that math right. I'm just an SAT verbal tutor. Yes, 6 hours to SAT. And guys, honestly, that's what kids in Asia pretty typically do, right? If you're in East Asia, in Taiwan, China, Korea, Saturday, I mean, they're actually going much further than this, but Saturday at the very least, they typically come in for SAT practice tests and at tutoring centers. So yeah, we want to take our test in the morning, and then we in the afternoon we'll review our mistakes. If you have a tutor you can work with, that's beneficial, right? I'm an SAT tutor, and I'm able to help people kind of identify quickly what went wrong during the test. So, typically here in Asia, you'll see people take the test in the morning. They'll meet with tutors in a one-on-one or in a group class in the afternoon to kind of review those mistakes, typically devoting a little bit of extra time to the verbal section because students here typically have better math skills, but you can adjust that as necessary. And then on Sunday, maybe you'll do a little bit of review. So your tutor said, your words and context skills or your vocab's a little bit weak. And so one great resource is Erica Meltzer's SAT Words and Guide to SAT Vocab that goes into words and context. So maybe you'll do, say, 20 pages of that or a chapter of that and spend an hour on that. And then maybe, your tutor noticed, hey, well, or you just happen to notice, hey, I didn't do so well on geometry, say. So you'll go into your College Panda Guide to Geometry, and we'll be talking about all these resources a little bit later on. You'll spend an hour there, and yeah, that's kind of how it goes. So this is an example study schedule, and I think make one of these. Why not, right? Make one of them. Try to use high quality resources as you're studying. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. Incorporate some rest days. You don't want to, you don't have to study every day. And a lot of this is too dependent on what your goal is, right? What's your target score? If your target score is 1600, maybe you aren't getting that rest day. If your target score is 1200, maybe you can have 2 rest days, right? So it's going to depend on where you are now and where you want to be, how much time you need to devote to all this. So, the other thing I would recommend is telling a friend or a parent or your tutor about this and having them keep you accountable, having them kind of, you know, force you to stay on schedule to a certain extent, or at least kind of check up on you. And of course, the schedule is going to change from a week to week, right? If you want to orient the schedule around your weaknesses, so you want to keep doing those practice tests. But if you notice, hey, I'm not doing well on literature passages, then adjust and use appropriate materials. I'm not going to get too much into materials today because I'll make an entire separate video on the best SAT materials out there. But there are things that I would recommend to a student who say was suffering in literature, not doing well in, say, main point questions, et cetera, et cetera. All right. So I wanted to give you guys a little brain teaser, a paradox. And so I've got two groups of students that I work with, broadly speaking. I've got my in-person students, and I can almost always predict my in-person students' actual test day SAT score within about 30 points. I feel pretty confident making prediction, and I'm almost always right about those predictions. Now, I've also got my online students, and I can only predict their scores within about 150 points. So what's going on here? What happened, right? What's what's the reason behind that? And I know you guys might be thinking, well, maybe with your in-person students, it's a one-on-one class, and it's a group class with your online students. No, I have a combination of both styles of classes for both, and that doesn't really affect my ability to predict these scores. All right, so I will tell you guys why. My in-person students, as I kind of talked about previously, they're coming to the tutoring center every Saturday, and they're taking official SAT practice tests every Saturday morning, and they're doing it under official timing and in a very realistic test setting. And that means that their scores, at our tutoring center are very, very similar, in some cases identical to what they get on test day. With my online students, I can't control their testing environment in the same way, right? And that puts, and unfortunately, that leads to things like, they might take the test and then they'll do it without paying attention to the timing. They'll take extra breaks, and all those little things add up. So for you guys, if you have access to a place that offers like SAT kind of like real testing center, I have one student in the Middle East who's going to Hales and just kind of going there to take his practice test. I don't necessarily recommend their tutoring. Maybe it's good. I don't know. But that can be a good option if you're the kind of person that is not going to set aside time each week to take the SAT in a realistic environment. So let's just talk about some of the problems with, and I hope you guys like this scheme, with the way that some of my students take the test. So we'll look at some of the problems. One, they're taking the test on an iPad, okay? Why is that a problem? Well, when you go into, when you go on test day, there aren't iPads there, okay? The SAT is not, as of yet, available on an iPad. So if you're taking the test on an iPad and thinking, oh, my score is going to be the same on test day, no. I'll tell you guys a little story, actually. One of my students recently had been doing a bunch of practice tests on the iPad. He went in on test day and things just seemed to go not very well at all, and he was actually having trouble reading the test. Well, he realized that on the iPad, he just zooms in on the question, right? And he later found out he needed a glasses prescription. So that can be an example of why your iPad test and your real test are not the same. You lose time flipping pages. You lose time bubbling things in. So, no to the iPad. Same goes for using a computer to take the test. The SAT, for most of you watching the video, is not going to be available on the computer. If you're going to be taking the SAT on the computer, some of you are able to do that. It's rare, and I don't actually recommend it for reasons I could go into in a separate video. But if you are, sure, by all means take it on a computer, as you're practicing. In fact, that's how you should be practicing. But for the vast majority of you out there that are taking on paper, don't think that your score, if you're going into the Khan Academy and doing their tests where you're like, I don't know, using that digital highlighter or something like that. No, that's not how things are on test day. It's not, it's not the worst thing you could be doing with your time, but it's not an official practice test. Other problems. Oh, I'm doing it at the cafe, having a little latte here. Again, not the worst, but one of the reasons that your score is not going to be like your score on test day. Oh, I did a couple of sections. Now I'm going to go up, grab another iced latte, come back. That's not how things go on test day. You're sitting on the comfy couch, kind of you're getting in your like comfortable position. Again, not how things are going to be on test day. Now for the good stuff. This guy I like. He's gotten himself in an environment that looks a lot like test day. If you can create an environment like this for yourself, great. He's even wearing a mask, which, hey, it's COVID year, right? You guys are probably going to have to wear a mask on test day. So why not get in the habit now? And he's got people around him like he would on test day. The kind of ambient noise is similar to what it would be on test day. Ooh, that looks good. Same for this woman here. She's taking it at a desk, the same she would be on test day. She doesn't have other stuff around her, like she doesn't have other books out that she's referencing, anything like that. So hope that gives you guys an idea of what you need to do on test day. So take the test under official conditions when you're practicing. And that means you're using, oh, by the way, you're using fresh tests. I had a girl, and what I mean by that is a test that you haven't seen or taken before. I had a student, she said, well, Matthew, my score is going way up. I just don't understand what's happening. My score is going way up, but when I went in to actually take the test, I just bombed it. And I said, okay, well, what tests were you using as your practice test? Oh, I just used the same tests and just recycled them. What? Okay, you're not going to see a test that you've seen before on test day. I hope so. So use a new practice test. And the big danger there as you're using practice tests is that, we don't want you to overuse practice tests so that you don't have any good ones left. So if you're like a really serious student, we'll talk about that at some other point where I don't want you like just, some people call it burning up tests. You just, use up all the good tests in a month and then you don't have any good way of like seeing what your actual score would be because you're just left with low quality tests. So we're using a printed copy of the test, by the way, and a bubble sheet. A lot of the strategies I teach my students actually work pretty much exclusively on printed copies of the test. I teach them a lot of highlighting strategies where they're using their pencil and they're getting in and they're circling certain things and they're underlining certain things. And by the way, that bubble sheet's important. Bubbling takes time, guys. And you might think, oh, I'm doing this in perfect time. But when you factor in that bubbling, that can add precious, precious minutes. And this is all about timing. So get your bubble sheet, bubble it just like you bubble on test day. There's a theme here, right? Do everything like test day. Use the official timing. Take official breaks only. We'll talk about what that official timing is. I've got a slide on that coming up. Ideally, you're taking this at the same time of day that you're taking the real SAT, Saturday morning. I mean, different people, think better at different times. Like for me, I'm a night person. And that can affect your score, right? If I'm taking, not SAT, I'm an expert, so, it doesn't matter what time of day for me, really, but for a harder test, like something like the GRE or GMAT, my score would actually fluctuate. It would go up a couple of points if I take it in the evening compared to taking it in the morning when I'm still just getting started and feeling, okay, so, and as an aside, you guys want to make sure your sleep schedule is, coordinated with the test, okay? Make sure that you're getting up consistently Saturday morning. So yeah, Saturday morning is a great time to take them because it's the time you're probably going to be taking the SAT, right? So Saturday morning at the exact same time, why not? Environment matters. You're sitting at a desk, you're in a library or a classroom, ideally, a kind of academic setting where there are some people around you who are also studying the SAT, ideally, right? Wear the clothes that you're going to be wearing on test day. Wear a mask if you're going to on test day. don't look at your cell phone, obviously. I shouldn't even have to say that one. Final rule here is don't lie to yourself. What I mean by that is this. I had a student who would come into my office and she would show me the practice test that she'd just done, and she'd say, have like, you know, a 1400, or we wouldn't have even scored it yet, actually. What would happen is, and so we'd be scoring it, and she'd say, okay, what was the answer to that? And I'd say C. And then I'd look down at her bubble sheet, and she'd have like kind of half filled in both the bubbles, and she'd be, oh yeah, I totally meant C on this. And I thought to myself, that's strange. And she did this a lot. She was lying to herself, okay? She was, you know, she was kind of altering her answers in such a way as to increase her score. Don't do that, okay? It is a kind of human nature. I get it. I kind of get why she was doing it. But, you know, that doesn't help anybody. That doesn't help anybody at all. It definitely doesn't help you. So don't lie to yourself. You know, and that's true across the SAT. If you're taking extra time, your test didn't count. Okay, if you're half bubbling, that's not a bubble, right? You know, those kinds of things add up and they matter. All right, so let's now talk about, you know, I said take only official SAT practice tests. So use only official tests. There are a couple of ways to do that, okay? And we already talked a little bit about the Khan Academy. Now, the Khan Academy does have 8 official tests available. As I said before, I don't really like the Khan Academy that much because you're taking those tests on a screen. If you must, for whatever reason, fine. Okay, it's not the worst thing in the world. Little bit better than that. Let's talk now about printed tests. Now, let's say I'm an SAT beginner, still kind of need the training wheels, or I'm kind of burning through tests and I find the PSAT does give me a nice challenge. Why not use the PSAT? And for those of you who don't know, PSAT is kind of like the pre-SAT. So it's a little bit less challenging, but it still tests all the same fundamental concepts of the SAT. There are 30 or so PDFs of PSATs floating about. I might have overstated the number. Maybe it's more like 15, but still, they can be a nice resource. Now, when we're getting into the top tier level stuff, official SAT study guide, the tests in there, those are also available on the College Board website, right, as PDFs. Print it out, print it out, print it out. Go to your print shop, print it out. Yes, it's going to cost a little bit of money, but I think it's well worth it to have the printed test, which is the same as you're going to have on test day. Finally, we've got what are called the QAS tests. These are this is like the God tier level because the QAS tests are the most recently released SAT test. QAS stands for Question and Answer Service. These are official real tests you can find online as PDF. Just Google SAT QAS PDF and you will find these things. And yeah, they are some of the best resources out there. They show you exactly what you'll see on test day. I mean, really, these last two, the official study guide and the QAS, that's exactly what you're going to see on test day. So that's the best stuff. Now, as far as what not to use, and I feel that I need to say this because a lot of students believe that, let's just take a look, the Princeton Review is good. They see something in the bookstore and they think, oh yeah, Princeton Review, that's a major corporation. So therefore, their SAT practice test must be good. Trash. Okay, not good at all. Why use this when you have, you know, 40 official SATs, PSATs that you could be drawing from? If you have used up all of those SATs and PSATs, I still don't even think you should be using this, frankly. I think it's trash. If you are somebody like me who's worked in SAT content development, when you look at these tests, I mean, they are, and I'm actually being generous to it by calling it trash because Princeton is trash. Kaplan is, not going to say it in the video, but I'm just going to leave the picture there. Okay, and Barron's is down here where I'm just crying because it's just horrible. I can make a video later showing you guys exactly why they're so bad. A lot of my students didn't believe this, but after I went through the questions and I analyzed them and I showed them how different they truly were and how different the passages truly were from the SAT. Cosmetically, it looks the same. just from a kind of like layman's perspective. I think if you're not an SAT specialist like myself, and you just pick it up and you open it up, you say, oh, this looks similar. But when you're an SAT specialist, everybody in the industry knows that these are trash, okay, or worse than trash. So avoid, avoid them, avoid them. Do not use them. There's no good reason to use them. If you think that you have a good reason to use them, just leave a message in the comments. Tell me why you think you should be using them, and I'll tell you why you shouldn't and what the better replacement would be. I hate the idea that anybody's using this stuff. All right. When you're taking your practice test, you're using official timing, so you're taking just 2 breaks, okay? 10-minute break after your reading test and a 5-minute break after your math no calc test. I know that's pretty brutal because that's, essentially 3 hours of testing. But hey, we're in it to win it, right? So let's do it. That will give you the most realistic way of looking at what your score is going to be, okay? I didn't include the essay timing because, as you guys have probably heard, essay is being removed from the SAT. International students, I think, in June will have the last shot at doing SAT with essay. I could be wrong on that, so double check me. It could be this next time in April that's the last shot. But that's going bye-bye, so didn't include it. All right, so once you've taken your test, okay, after you take it, take an hour break or something. We don't want you to just get straight into studying. I always recommend, say, after you take a test, my students here, my in-person students will typically take a 1 hour long break. And, I would always ask yourself, why? Why did I get that question wrong? So record your score. You want to have a big spreadsheet that has all your scores for each test, each official practice test you're taking. You want to be detailed. You want to think about what kind of, how many reading questions did you get wrong? What passages were they in? Was that in a science passage? Was it in a history passage, a literature passage? What kind of questions were they? Was it a words and context question, inference question? And then why did you get it wrong? What went wrong there? You didn't know the strategy. You didn't know a certain vocab word. Analyze that and focus on that. And the same goes across all the sections of the SAT for reading, for writing, and for math. I don't talk too much about math, but I can guarantee that this strategy remains the same in math. I'm mostly a verbal specialist. All right, so this is an example of one of my students' spreadsheets of just that. We're looking at the November 2018 May QAS. The reading section, he got 7 questions wrong. So we kind of go through and we say what each of the kind of questions was and what happened and what kind of passage it was. That lets us then go back and kind of focus in on, okay, maybe he needs to focus on literal comprehension or purpose or evidence. So we're being detailed. Now, after you pick up on your weaknesses and you've actually identified them, use high quality SAT resources. And I don't have time to get into that in this video. I'll make another video about what I think are high quality SAT resources to target that. So let's say you're not doing well in social science passages. Well, maybe do some PSAT social science passages for practice, right? And so that way you're not burning through SATs. That's a good resource. If you're having trouble with subject-verb agreement questions, you can use something like Erica Meltzer's Ultimate Guide to SAT Grammar. If you're having trouble with fractions in the math test, look at that chapter in the College Panda SAT Math Workbook. And again, your schedule is going to kind of change around those issues, okay, those weaknesses. So I hope that makes sense. There are tons of resources out there that you can use to address your issues. So then you're going to want to review your weaknesses over time. And so I think one of the best ways is either in your schedule kind of set up some time for doing that, or just use flashcards. And I really like, up here I've got a screenshot of a software called Anki. I think it's really nice because it's called space repetition software. So it brings back concepts over time. The first time you see it, you'll see it again the next day, and then you'll see it maybe in 2 days from that, and then 5 days from that, and then 10 days from that. And that's a really great way to reinforce information, have that kind of spaced repetition of it. And otherwise, you're going to forget the stuff that you learned, and that will make you very morose. SAT vocab word there. That means sad. All right. So, final words of wisdom. Your score on test day should not be a surprise. Okay. I hate when students tell me, I don't know what I'm going to get. Why not? You should know exactly what you're going to get. If you follow the steps that I've outlined in this video, and you take a test under official conditions, then you're going to know exactly what your score is on test day, just like my students here know it, and I know what their score is going to be. So I don't want to hear this, I don't know how I'm going to feel on test day. You should, or I don't know what I'm going to get on test day, rather. You should know. Set goals. That's another thing I'd want to add in here. Maybe set a goal, say by, the end of this month or in 4 weeks, I want to score a 1250, and then next month I want to score a 1300. So set goals and put in the work to achieve those goals. Not rocket science there. All right, guys. Well, I think that wraps up the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know what you would like to cover, like me to cover next, down in the comments. So it's been a pleasure, and I hope to see you guys again soon. Have a good one. Bye-bye.